All right, guys, this piece is 126, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, Pablo Picasso, 1907, oil on canvas. And this canvas is 8 feet square. So the women in this piece are almost larger than life. So they are a little bit larger than an actual life-size person would be. So that's how large this is. So here we get into Pablo Picasso, and this really marks the beginning of abstract art. So if we think about abstract art, we think of art similar to this, things that are much more challenging the norm, things that are not realistic. Um, they are a little bit more tough and um, challenging previous conceived notions of what art really is. Okay. Um, Here we have um, an example of a movement in which Picasso really begins to create. And here we see the beginnings of this, which is Cubism. Okay. So Cubism is really the type of art in which an artist breaks down these natural shapes in or natural forms into shapes. Okay, so very rough shapes. If you look at the women, you see a lot of triangular shapes, a lot of hard edges, and some circular shapes, but mostly things have pointed edges. This makes something very tense. There is a sharpness about it that I think is disturbing to the viewers. If you think of something like Ingres's or Titian's Venuses, okay, they're much more flowy body types, very realistic, um, but but obviously idealized as well, right? And then you have something very harsh and direct within this piece of Picasso. So don't mind the dog barking, but let's get into a little bit more about Picasso and what we see here in this piece. So Les Demoiselles d'Avignon basically is of the Madame the of Avignon. Okay, so basically the prostitutes of Avignon. That's basically what this is saying. Okay, so here we have 5 prostitutes. He as in Pablo Picasso, liked to call this piece my brothel. Okay, with his prostitutes. So it's interesting because and we'll get into kind of a little bit more emotionality behind why he's creating this piece. But you can tell that up until this point, Venuses were very popular. And so this was a whole horror. People were just horrified by this painting because of directness to the viewer and its outward sexuality. Okay. So again, he called this his brothel. This piece is very non-harmonious. So there's a lot of conflict and tension going on within the piece. It's cramped, um, but he's also redefining this idea of beauty. Okay, and so this is one of the most important works of the 20th century art movement because of what it's doing, how it's really evolving art. Before this piece, we can see this build up to an abstract movement through Impressionism. Impressionism slowly gets more abstract, more abstract. People are challenging what they see every day outside in life. Okay, so Picasso takes this a step further. The other thing that's a big thing that you need to consider is the development of the camera. So this, and in 127, which is the next piece, the steerage, Alfred Stieglitz, which is a prominent photographer, the photograph becomes a way of capturing reality. So at this specific time period, the photograph is becoming this tool to capture in an instant your reality around you. Well, what does that do for artists? Because all of a sudden, you cannot, like, you don't have to sit in front of a painter and have them paint your likeness. Okay. You can actually have a picture instantaneously created. And so now portrait artists are like, what do we do? Okay. Well, so over time, this really helps develop this movement into the abstract art world because painters no longer had to represent the reality around them. They were looking for different things. They were challenging what they saw. They were breaking things down into their natural basic shapes and how they were working with those figures. Okay. So that's really kind of the development of this cubism and abstract art and how this really begins to develop from this point forward. And then obviously once it begins to develop, it just kind of grows and grows and grows. Picasso had a very long life. He lived to be like 82. So he had a ton of work collected throughout his life. We're going to look at his movements and how his life really he began as an artist by creating very lifelike images. You can see on the bottom left that this is more impressionistic. We can kind of see some impressionistic details in it, but then he's very fluid. It's a little bit more lifelike, although the middle picture looks like arms look a little awkward and string beanie, and they're awkward poses, but it's not as abstract as what we see in his later work. So this is his early years painting in a very naturalistic manner through his childhood and adolescence. During the first decade of the 20th century, his style changed as he experimented with different theories, techniques, and ideas. His work is often categorized into different periods. While the names of many of his later periods are debated, the most commonly accepted periods of his work are his blue period, which we see below with the blue guitar, the rose period, which is the middle piece, the African influenced period, which is the Demoiselles d'Avignon, which we'll talk about how the African influence is those pieces, analytic cubism, synthetic cubism, and that's also referred to as the crystal period. And then he gets a little bit more into kind of synthetic and collage type art too. Exceptionally prolific throughout the course of his long life, Picasso achieved universal renown and immense fortune in his revolutionary artistic accomplishments, and he became one of the best known figures in the 20th century art movement. Picasso was kind of one of the main people that really grew fame and fortune throughout his life as an artist, as a living artist. Analytic cubism is a style of painting that Picasso developed with George Braque using monochromatic brownish neutral colors. Both artists took apart objects and analyzed them in terms of their shapes. That's really a key point to cubism. They literally took apart the objects, analyzed them in their shapes, and then scattered them around. Picasso and Braque's paintings at this time share very many similarities. Synthetic cubism was further developed of this genre, which is in more cut paper fragments, often wallpaper or portions of newspaper pages, were pasted into compositions, really marking the first use of collage in fine art. So you can also look at Picasso as being this revolutionary person who really started the movement of collage. So in many different circumstances, Picasso was kind of the father of a lot of abstract art movements. Between 1915 and 17, Picasso began a series of paintings depicting highly geometric and minimalistic cubist objects, consisting of either a pipe, guitar, a glass, with an occasional element of collage. They're very hard-edged, square-cut diamonds. So here we look at his quote-unquote hard-edged, square-cut diamonds, and we can see the remnants of what I believe is a violin. Okay, so if you look at, there's a curved edge, there are strings, you can see the top part of the violin at the very top. But again, these hard-edged, square-cut diamonds that are cut up and distributed in different places. So you're really looking at a kind of, abstract piece that is scattered basic shapes. This is one of Picasso's most famous pieces, which is called Guernica, and it was created right before the launch of World War II at the bombing of a small Basque city called Guernica in northern Spain. And it was during the Civil War in Spain, and the German and Italians fleet went ahead and just openly bombed this city. And Picasso, being Spanish born, saw this image of the bombing in the newspaper when he was living in Paris, and he created this giant piece that's probably as long as our wall in art class, in our art room, and very very large piece that's really showing the agony of this bombing. This is one of his. This and Demoiselles d'Avignon are probably his most um, important works. So diving into a little bit more of this specific piece, the Demoiselles d'Avignon, again, marked the beginning of the abstract art movement. He, like I said, called it his brothel, and it was really redefining the idea of beauty. Um, People were very horrified by the painting. Picasso made us rethink what sexuality really was. He made us rethink a type of physical space and just art in the world in general. Okay, so in this piece we have 5 prostitutes. They're all in different positions, but they're all naked. They're all looking very sexual, but very casual, very comfortable. This piece, and then you have the two women that are looking back at you, um, making you almost uncomfortable because of their poses. Okay, Picasso had a fear of sexual diseases, specifically syphilis. Syphilis was a huge prevalent disease in the early 1900s in Paris, and everybody had it. Everybody was kind of sleeping around with everybody else, and syphilis was something that Picasso continually feared, but he still kept sleeping with prostitutes. So in this piece, he's really showing his attitude of sex and how it is fearful. It's almost creating like these women, these prostitutes, like monsters because of this disease that they could possibly carry, creating this whole cycle of sex, fear, desire, death, how desire could equal your death, how the fear of the sexual disease is within these women, and almost like this femme fatale thing. So like these fatal women, like if you could sleep with them and then you could die because of this specific disease. Oddly enough, Picasso went through his life very conscientious of syphilis, and then eventually contracted it in his older years. So there you go. He created over 700 sketches for this painting, and he was painting against a narrative. And we believe that it was influenced by these Iberian sculptures and African masks. He really denied that, but at the time in Paris, there was all of these exhibits going on showcasing these African masks, like the ones that we would study, the emblem mask, the portrait mask, and you can really see this African-esque mask look on these women, especially on the right too, and how they are looking back at you in this mask-like look. So he really denied this, but if you can really, if you put a mask and this piece next to each other, you can really see how he would have been influenced by that at the time, because that was a prevalent aspect in the art world when he created this piece. So many people kind of look at this as like this kind of savage beauty. For Picasso, I think it was more or less a also influenced by Matisse, which was kind of his rival at the time. They have contorted bodies and different skin colors. So a lot of this piece that you just need to know is, I mean, I could talk forever about it, but I'm running out of time. So just that kind of savage beauty, that really, this is the momentum of abstract art moving forward, and the importance of Picasso in the art world with Des Mademoiselles d'Avignon.